This week on Quality Digest Live, did someone forget to pull the Andon cord at Toyota?
Plus, is your quality manual an abomination? We'll find out when we come back.
That line was an abomination, but...
This week's sponsor of Quality Digest Live is 360 Performance Circle, your destination for today's best training tools. Streaming online now.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for April 4th, 2014. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Mike Richmond, the Abominable publisher of Quality Digest.
And I'm Quality Digest Editor-in-Chief, Dirk Ducharme. Well, you know, we've talked about the Internet of Things on this show before, and if you remember what the Internet of Things is that is where more and more we're seeing everyday objects, clothing, home appliances, your heater, your car, that's connected to the Internet and report data back maybe to the manufacturer or back to yourself. Well, Gartner Incorporated is forecasting a 30-fold increase in Internet-connected physical devices by 2020. The Internet of Things, or IoT, is forecast to reach 26 billion, that's billion with a B, installed units by 2020. That's up from 0.9 billion just 5 years ago. Now, according to Gartner, this will impact the information available to supply chain leaders and how the supply chain operates. So if you think about how the context in which we've typically talked about IoT on our show and in some of our articles, it has been mostly as a means of monitoring products to aid in customer service. The context that Gartner discusses IoT in this article is IoT as a means to segment the market. So what he's talking about here is imagine if all the devices that you use as a consumer, including, by the way, your clothing, are connected to the Internet and are reporting information back to the manufacturer. That allows them to do what? Know how you're using that product. Well, imagine what that allows them to do. That lets them segment the market better and in ways that they've never been able to do before because they're actually getting information from the field. So this information can be combined with, let's say, demographics to really segment that market. But here's the deal. As the market becomes more segmented, customers more and more are going to expect customization. The tighter you make your market, the more customers are expecting out of the product that you're delivering. And if you think about the ultimate market segmentation, is one-to-one, right? If a marketer or a company can reach individual people with individual needs, that's the ultimate in segmentation. Well, we're not there yet. But as customers expect more and more customization, that leads us to what? We've talked about it before, 3D printing. Gartner points out that the combination of technologies like IoT and 3D printing are going to push production, that's our words, further and further down the supply chain. And what we're talking about here is if you've really segmented your market and you really know what your audience, a small segment of your audience is looking for, you're more and more able to customize the products for them. But that kind of customization requires technology that is only really just now coming into the fore. And we're talking 3D printing because 3D printing does allow you a type of customization that you really can't get any other way. So as the market becomes more segmented, you're going to see more 3D printing. I'm reading between the lines here now on Gartner's article. You're going to see more 3D printing. 3D printing is the last step before the customer, which means you've shortened your supply chain. I mean, ideally, if you could completely 3D print any object, then basically your supply chain would be only what's needed to supply materials to the 3D printer.
Right.
And that'd be it.
That'd be it, right.
Yeah. And basically your supply chain would go away except for the material supply.
Yeah, and I want to get back to something else that you pointed out and Gartner mentioned in their piece, and this idea that more information is known now about people, about where they are in real time and what they're doing, and that upsets some people, and that can be a little bit unsettling. What's going to make that better for consumers is if in exchange for that lack of privacy, which it probably is a lack of privacy, they get better service. They are able to get customization the way they want it. So it's kind of a yin-yang thing going on here, is that, yes, there's less, you kind of walk throughout the world with less privacy. Your actions and your movements are noted more, but you're going to get served better, maybe, by producers, by manufacturers that are going to produce stuff for you just the way you want it, just when you want it. So if that trade-off happens that way, it's going to be great. If it doesn't, if there's an imbalance there, it's going to be more of an issue. But
yeah. By the way, we have another good IoT article in the works from one of our contributors, Jack Thornton, so keep your eyes open for that.
And we're going to be watching this issue as well in the weeks, months, and years coming up. Okay. Sorry. Also in the news this week, most appropriately released on April 1st, came the annual announcement from the International Six Sigma Institute and Secret Society for Imperious Professionals, or
ISSS
of Process Improvement, better known by their easy-to-remember name, which is an acronym, actually, ISSISSIPPI. Yes, that's it. This year, the esteemed organization is embracing a topic much in the news these days, big data. They partnered with the world-class statisticians and developers over at moresteam.com to come up with a big data tool that can be used by anyone and everyone. If you've ever wanted the ability to see and understand big numbers, and we mean really big numbers, this tool is for you. Oh, and if you like visual management, well, then I guess this tool is for you too. Let's take a look. And we're going to show you the web page right here. So as you can see, this is an extremely flexible tool, and that's on the ISSISSIPPI website, that pretty much lets you turn any data into big data. If you, let's say, I don't know, let's say if you want to punch in the number 2, right? And you put in the number 2, and then you want to use the Bigify button. The Bigify tab right down there, which will, in Bigify, technical term,
wow, that's
the number,
big data.
There is your big data.
That's huge.
Right there is your big data.
That's significant data.
This is significantly big data, as you can see. Now, if you do that, you're going to be able to then analyze that data, maybe, and you're going to be able to, I think, I don't know, because ISSIPPI.
Well, I think one of the things that they pointed out why this is really important is that a lot of times managers are looking for, they want to know if the data is significant.
Right.
Well, nothing says significant like big data.
And that's about as big as it gets.
That's as significant as you can go.
So again, hopefully the good folks at ISSIPPI, sorry, I always get that wrong, will provide some further guidance on this in their little dilemma of analyzing the big data. In the next issue, next article, next April 1st.
Bigify that data.
There you go. So for more information on this news item, and in fact all the pieces that Dirk and I are going to be covering on today's show, be sure to check out the story links right below the video player screen, right down there.
That's right. Embiggen your data.
Embiggen your data. It's very technical term.
Data. Yeah. Okay. Okay, well, just a little over 3 weeks ago on March 8th, Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 disappeared, and as yet, there is still no clue as to where it went down, why it went down, or even if it went down, because there are many people who believe that maybe it didn't. Maybe it was hijacked and landed secretly somewhere. But according to this lack of information, Quality Digest columnist Matthew Barcelow, in his article, The Guru and the Bard, said that hasn't stopped lawyers from seeking to identify component manufacturers and the companies that inspected and performed maintenance on the aircraft. In other words, who can we sue? And this shouldn't come as any surprise, says Barcelow. After all, wreckage of Asian Airlines Flight 217 was still burning at San Francisco Airport, even as lawyers started filing their suits. In his book, Out of the Crisis, W. Edwards Deming describes what he calls the 7 deadly diseases. And number 7 is excessive legal damage awards swelled by lawyers working on contingency fees. At issue, writes Barcelow, is not just excessive legal damages awarded, but the cost of insurance that manufacturers must carry to protect themselves against frivolous lawsuits. Companies that don't have sufficient insurance may fall, says Barcelow, simply by defending themselves against lawsuits that should never have involved them. And he concludes in his article with this little bit, if we can put that slide. It seems that lawyers haven't changed much in the quarter century since the publication of Out of the Crisis. It may be fair to ask if they have changed much during the past centuries. In William Shakespeare's Henry VI, the character offers the suggestion, the first thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers. Perhaps Shakespeare's comment is a little bit extreme, but it makes one wonder if the Bard and the Guru had the same general opinion of lawyers. So obviously, this doesn't have to do with all lawyers, but it really does point to this thing that happens within our society, and we're going to get to an interesting quote from one of our readers, where it's not just lawyers, it's ourselves. We want to do something even if we don't have enough data to do it. And one of our readers read this article, and his comment, and this came from Dan Nelson, and this was regarding various reader polls that have started circulating right now from various national news media that have also come out recently. And the polls are asking basically, what do you think happened to Malaysia Flight 317 or 370? Here's what Nelson says. The real news. Being clueless doesn't stop people from voting. Really, the poll itself is something of a farce. Understanding we are all ignorant of the reality of what happened, we are nevertheless going to poll people and report what we think happened. From that, we really know nothing at all, except that clueless people vote. We have proof of it provided by 100% of the people responding to the poll. It's kind of a harsh comment, but I like it because it really, like I said, it points to something that we want to do. We don't have data, but it's an interesting topic. It grabs us viscerally. So we want to respond to it, even though our response to it makes no sense at all because we have no data to go with. So basically, the poll becomes the news because the substance of the poll means nothing.
Right. Well, and you know, the term that I thought of when I read this article was fuselage chasers.
Fuselage chasers, yeah, getting back to the lawyers, right.
Right, getting back to the lawyers. Yeah. I mean, you know, this is the society we live in. Again, it's actually another one of these ideas where there's a balance in play here because, you know,
you got to have it.
You got to have it because as consumers, you know, you need to have the protections of legal protections in case something goes wrong, and there's a legal there's a problem that you can sue somebody for, and you have to have that protection, but you can go overboard real easily, and it creates a lot of fees, and it creates a lot of cost in systems like healthcare, for instance. Sure. Healthcare costs we know are skyrocketing because of legal fees, a lot right. in many cases. So, you know, where does that balance lie? You know, lawyers are important. Hey, you know, you got to have them, but I mean, in the same way, you have to understand that there's a limit to that, and you know, you can't sue yourself out of the issue. You have to deal with the root causes of the issue, and
which we don't know.
So
yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
you know, lawyers kind of sit down and wait and see what happens. So it's an interesting article from Matthew Barceló. He always writes good articles, Matthew Barceló. So again, that article is right below the player page. The Guru and the Bard, right down there for your reading pleasure. Okay, another issue that came up, which also is legalistic in a way and ties back to the issue of responsibility, is an article we ran in Wednesday's issue of Quality Digest Daily called The Invisible Andon Cord. And this piece was written by all of us here at Quality Digest. And you can see, it'll be up there in a second, the article itself, which you can read. The Invisible Andon Cord, again, it ran on Wednesday's issue of Quality Digest Daily, written by all of us here on Quality Digest staff and all of us in the editorial department. And we don't do this a lot. This is something we do rarely, where we speak with one voice and we put out to you our thoughts as a team about something that occurred that we think needs to be addressed. And in this case, I think this is something that does need to be addressed, and it's a serious issue, a very serious issue here. As many of you know, Toyota recently settled with the Department of Justice, the DOJ, and accepted a $1.2 billion fine from the DOJ as a penalty for misleading the public and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, the NHTSA, about a series of recalls in 2009 and 2010 over sticky accelerated pedals and entrapped floor mats, a couple of issues that affected people's ability to control the acceleration of their Toyotas and stop in time. These were design and mechanical failures that directly were responsible for dozens of deaths. I mean, it's clear, the information is available now that these issues caused many people to die. And of course, this is a serious issue as well, as I'm talking about, and this is something that we need to take seriously. But there's issues within this that I think us as quality professionals can deal with and can think about and need to think about. According to the reports, and we encourage you to link out to the article and look at these reports because they're interesting and they're from a number of sources, not only the DOJ, but CBS News and a few other sources as well. According to those reports, Toyota engaged in a pattern of deceit by misleading, again, the public and the NHTSA and underplaying the severity of these issues with these mechanical failures, and overpromising on the fixes that were going to be delivered, and that their engineers were attempting to make. They always were underplaying it. Well, yes, it's an issue. We're fixing it. It's not going to be an issue going forward. It continued to be an issue, and finally recalls were obviously issued, and the vehicles came back, and it was addressed. But it's clear, at least it's clear to me, that Toyota employees knew that these problems were much more severe than were being let on. And I think that they knew that things were going on here that weren't right. They knew that management wasn't really dealing with it properly. And I think that management especially made a concerted effort to mislead the NHTSA and the customers of Toyota themselves. Now, part of this really is the NHTSA. I think we have to look at this too. The NHTSA is a watchdog agency. It's an administration that really is there to protect consumers and to make sure that things like this don't happen. And they need to be doing their own research and information. And the NHTSA said, well, we were misled by a Toyota. Toyota misled us on this. Well, sure, I understand that can happen, but we have to assign some blame to the NHTSA too, because they really should be gathering their information on their own. They should be gathering the big data. They should be collating it and correlating causes. I mean, they need to be the ones, I think, more than relying on Toyota to tell them what's going on. They need to be taking the responsibility to go to Toyota and say, hey, you have an issue that is affecting customers.
Which, by the way, is coming up in that same question has been raised for the GM case.
Well, I'm going to get to that in a minute, yes, because Toyota's not alone in this. But this isn't all on management either. And again, getting back to the title of this article, the invisible Andon cord. As we all know, any of you who study the Toyota production system know, the Andon cord is a technique that Toyota has in its plants where anybody on the line at any time can pull that cord if they notice something that's going wrong in the production process. And what happens is a manager will scurry over and they'll look at whatever the widget is that somebody says is at fault, there's an issue, and they'll stop the line to address it, and then the line will return to action very quickly, usually within a few minutes. It's not usually that big of a deal. But the idea is here that somebody at Toyota knew that this was a bigger issue than management was letting on. But did anybody there pull that cord?
Well, I think they did. It's just it wasn't because remember, we're not talking a physical cord now, we're talking a metaphorical cord. Yeah, and it sounds like somebody did try to pull it, but it was just ignored.
Well, it was ignored, but here's the issue. The core of this issue is, what's your responsibility as an employee? Is your responsibility to Toyota, or is your responsibility to your customers that are buying Toyota products? And I mean, it's an automobile. It's potentially a deadly weapon. I mean, it's something that's very dangerous if it's not working properly. And if we have accelerator pedal problems or entrapped floor mats, that's a big issue. And yes, okay, they pulled the cord. They told management, we got an issue with this. You got to look at it. Management probably seems like, from what we can find out, what we're knowing, management kind of swept it under the rug and said, well, yeah, we're going to deal with that. We're going to deal with the media, and we're going to deal with the NHTSA, but we're really not going to take the actions that need to be taken because it's expensive to issue recalls of millions of automobiles, right? I mean, it's not something that they want to do, but you need to do it, obviously, if your customers are at risk. So, I mean, what does the employee do at that point? You pulled the cord, you told management. Now do you say, well, we told management, it's fine, I did my job, or do you do something more? And what is that more? Do you become a whistleblower? Do you go to the press? What do you do? And this is a really key issue. You brought up another really interesting issue. Part of this is that, every product that's in the field, every consumer product potentially has a failure mode that could kill somebody, right? A toaster, anything, right? I mean, potentially somebody could die from misusing or mechanical failure of any product that's out there. So, how far do you extrapolate? How far do you as an employee say, well, maybe there's a problem with this, so I have to address it? I mean, in this case, I think it was pretty darn clear that there was problems that could and were killing people. So I think it's pretty clear that they needed to take more responsibility, more of an action for it. But where do you draw that line? It's a hard one to know.
Yeah, and I think you're there. And this may have just, without being behind the scenes, you don't know actually what happened, but it looks like you're right. It looks like what happened, somebody said, hey, we got a problem, sure. Management swept it under the rug. Your question is,
what do you do next?
As an employee who reported an issue and it apparently was ignored, you're saying, well, what do you do from then? Do you blow the whistle, or do you just trust that management's going to do the right thing? You just haven't seen it yet.
This is a tough one. It's a very, very difficult thing to know what's right. And and we're not just slamming Toyota here. You alluded to it. GM's had problems with this as well. GM's also had some mechanical problems that have caused deaths recently. And as a matter of fact, in some cases, in some perspectives, GM's problem was worse because it goes back further. It goes back more than a decade to problems they've had repeatedly where they also had tardy recalls and they needed to be addressed. And as a matter of fact, right now, Mary Barra, who is the CEO, new CEO of GM, this week was on Capitol Hill actually getting grilled by senators and congressmen about this very issue. And I would expect that the DOJ is going to probably come down on GM as well in a very similar way. Hey, you know, we're not sitting here, we didn't write this article just to kind of assign blame and just splash it out there. We did it because we feel like, you know, those of you that read Quality Digest Daily every day are the ones who best understand how these things happen. You understand the root causes of problems, and you're the ones that can maybe best help to untangle them. And, you know, I guess the question is, what's the personal responsibility? We're not blaming anybody, but we're saying, well, what should we do? What should you do as a quality professional if you really know that something's going awry in your product that's risking your customers' lives? What's your responsibility? Is it to your company or is it to your customers? It's things we need to think about. I think we need to think about it as quality professionals because you are the one that really can best address that, and really I think most help protect your customers, and I think we need to do that.
Yep. Accountability, where does it start and where does it end?
Yeah, absolutely. Good point.
Well, all of you who are familiar with ISO 9001 know what its intent is and what the purpose of your quality manual is. So if you think about the quality manual, first, the purpose of the quality manual is to provide value to the company. The idea of the quality manual is that it should be a go-to place where anybody can go to that manual and they can understand what the company's doing, they can understand the process, they can have a reference to all of the materials and so forth. And second, the quality manual is something for the auditor to look at. It's what the auditor comes in and evaluates the company's QMS. It's how they determine whether the QMS is in alignment with the ISO 9001 standard or whatever standard we're talking about. It is the auditor's responsibility, it is their job to understand, with the help of management or whoever is there at the company, to help understand how that quality manual aligns itself with, we'll just keep saying ISO 9001 here, with the QMS. What's happening, though, according to Miriam Boudreau in her article, The Abominable Quality Manual, is that more and more we see, or she is seeing, auditors try to force companies into making their quality manual essentially look like ISO 9001. And basically she asked the question, what is this, 1994? I mean, we left behind that whole era where you had your ISO 9001 checklist. That went away with the process approach. What we're supposed to be doing now is that your quality manual is representative of what your company is doing. And yes, it has it must do certain things in terms of meeting the needs of the standard, but nowhere in ISO 9001 does it say that your quality manual must list each clause and subclause and each bulleted point. But lazy auditors, according to Miriam, are actually steering companies down that road, and she's arguing, wait a minute, this is crazy. You can't do that. There's no value in it. Miriam asked the question. She says it's a thing of beauty. Those are her words. It's a thing of beauty when you can open up and look at somebody's quality manual, read it, and understand what the culture of the company is, understand how their processes are integrated, and still be able to link out to procedures and so forth, which is one of the requirements of ISO 9001. It isn't, nowhere in the standard is prescriptive on how you do this. So how did this come about? Well, she says, a lot of the reason that this came about is just over time, and I'm kind of paraphrasing her, auditors were finding it difficult, too bad. They were finding it difficult to see the correlation. Somebody would write a quality manual. Yes, technically it met the needs of ISO 9001, but it wasn't easy for the auditors to kind of see how this part of the manual lined up with that part of the standard. So to make their life easier, they just said, well, you need to say this here and this here and this here, and you need to have these bullet points over there. So where's the value in that? Well, there is no value in that. But it's gotten worse. Another thing that's happening, you think, okay, so they're kind of manipulating the quality manual. Another thing that Miriam has seen is that some auditors now are also trying to affect the actual procedures. Now that's way overboard. Okay, and the example she gives is there will be a procedure, and part of what ISO 9001 requires is that everything needs to be recorded in a legible fashion so that it can be looked up and reviewed and so forth. She has come across auditors who are requiring verbiage in the procedure that says this data will be recorded and so on and so forth. Not required. So what do you do? Well, there's a couple different routes. You can fight it, and we'll get to a comment here from a reader. You can fight it, or as Miriam is going to show in part 2 of this story, you can try to write a quality manual that appeases, and we'll use that word, appeases the auditor and yet somehow provides value to you as a company. It's not the ideal solution, but it may be kind of a route to go. Now, we did have a reader who totally agrees with Miriam in terms of this issue occurring. He disagrees with how to handle it. And we have this comment we'll throw up on the screen there. This is from Dave Gentile. I have a low tolerance for fools, and he's referring to auditors. There's certainly much value in having a roadmap of a QMS, and a company should do all it can to make its QMS user-friendly. But in the end, it's meant to serve the company, not the auditor. I understand why no one wants to rile up an auditor, but companies pay good money for certification audits and deserve to expect some competence and professionalism from auditors. And again, that was Dave Gentile commenting on the article that Miriam Boudreau wrote. So the funny thing is Miriam actually has another article that she wrote quite a while ago. There is recourse. If you disagree with your auditor, you can go along, you can say, okay, fine, I think you're wrong, but whatever, I'll do whatever you ask me to do. You don't have to. There is recourse. You can always go back to the registrar, and you can take it up with the registrar, and you can tell the registrar, your auditor's wrong. And you can argue with them. If you don't get any joy there, you go to the accreditation body, which in the United States would be ANSI ANAB. Have that right? ANSI? ANAB, right? ANAB, I'm sorry. Would be ANAB, that's the accreditation body for the registrar, and you file a complaint. The auditors are there to do one thing, and that's to verify that your manual adheres to the requirements of ISO 9001. They are not there to tell you how to write your manual. That's it. Plain and simple. If you don't like it, you go back to the registrar, and if that doesn't get you anywhere, you'll go to the accreditation body. Like you said, Miriam is going to say, a lot of people don't want to do this, and get to Gentile's comment there. You're a small company. A lot of people have said that, doing ISO 9001, it can be time consuming. If you're a small company, it's a time crusher. You got to get your documentation together, you got to do all this stuff, then an auditor comes in, you've got to take, a couple days out for the auditor to come in, do his thing. You want to get this thing over and done with very often. So do you want to spend the time fighting it? Maybe not. So Miriam's point is, well, there is a way to write the manual that kind of bridges this gap, and she's going to get into it on part 2, which will be next week. I believe next Thursday we're running part 2 of this article. So
yeah, it's it's a tough issue because again, the quality manual and ISO 9001, your registration to ISO 9001 exists to serve you and to serve your customers better. And I think sometimes we get caught up so much in the process of ironing out the process that we lose sight of what's really important here is that you want to have your processes be understood by your employees, and you want that documented so that you can show it to an auditor, but really you want to be able to improve your company. I mean, that's really what it all comes down to. And I think Miriam would agree with that you shouldn't have to parrot what an auditor wants. You should be able to get just the value out of doing it.
She has a phrase she uses, parrot phrase the standard. She's a lot of companies are now having to parrot phrase the standard. I like that.
And it's almost like the way the educational system is here in the U.S., where it's just like just spit it back, just memorize it and spit it back. No critical thinking involved. And that's not why you registered ISO 9001 or any of these standards. So, good stuff from Miriam. She always is well read and always has a good point to make. So check that out, and we'll look forward to part 2 next week as well.
There we go. Hey, we got a tweet of the week this week.
We do have a tweet of the week this week, and it fits in nice, I think, with the reality embodied by both of the feature articles we just covered here on the show. This one comes to us from Twitter user Sean Upchurch, who tweeted out an old Russian proverb: "Better to be slapped with the truth than kissed with a lie." I like that one, and I think that applies to both those stories. You know, get to the truth of the matter. That's what you want, even if it's a little hard sometimes. Well said, Sean. As always, you can follow us on Twitter at Quality Digest, and we'll look forward to more tweets of the week coming up soon. Okay, well, that's our show for the week. But before we go, we'd like to thank today's sponsor, 360 Performance Circle, a new kind of training company. With handsomely produced streaming video content covering lean, quality, and best practices within test and measurement, 360 Performance Circle is your destination point for the best training on the web. For more information, check out the banner ad just below or just to the right of this video player screen.
That's right. And we're going to slap you with the truth.
That's right.
We won't kiss you with a lie.
Repeatedly.
That's right. Okay. Well, thank you for joining us this week, and it's been a great show. Keep your eyes open for 2 articles coming up. Miriam Boudreau's Part 2, how to write your quality manual in a way that kind of bridges that gap we were just talking about. And also an interesting Internet of Things article coming up from Jack Thornton, maybe in a week and a half. So keep your eyes open for those.
Yeah, we'll be covering that coming up soon.
That's right. Well, thanks for joining us this week, and we'll see you again next Friday.
That's right. Have a great weekend.
So long.
Bye.